6 popes, 16 documents, 160 years of warnings. Between 1832 and 1950, a series of popes wrote encyclicals that predicted, with remarkable precision, the crisis the modern world is living through right now. They named the diseases, relativism, materialism, the collapse of meaning, decades before anyone else noticed the symptoms. These are the popes against modern errors, 16 papal documents, and the things they condemned as deadly errors are now the foundational assumptions of every Western democracy on earth. In 1832, Pope Gregory XVI issued Mirari Vos. The French Revolution was still fresh. Thrones were toppling. Gregory called liberty of conscience, the idea that every person should be free to believe whatever they want, an absurd and erroneous proposition. Freedom of the press was a plague. He compared bad books to poison. Would any sane man distribute poison just because an antidote exists? He wasn't speaking from an ivory tower. He watched the revolution devour France. He watched liberty, equality, fraternity produce the guillotine. When he says unlimited freedom leads to ruin, he has a body count to point to. 32 years later, Pope Pius IX issued the Syllabus of Errors, a list of 80 ideas the Church declares false. The final one, error number 80, condemns the proposition that the Roman pontiff can and ought to reconcile himself with progress, liberalism, and modern civilization. The Pope is saying the Church will never make peace with modernity. Not now, not ever. That was 1864. 100 years later, the Second Vatican Council would take a very different position. Pope Leo XIII wrote 4 major encyclicals in this collection, and they are not mere condemnations, they are arguments. In Libertas, his encyclical on liberty, he makes this claim: God and the angels, who cannot sin, are more free than human beings, not less. The ability to choose evil is not a feature of freedom. It is a defect, like disease is not a feature of having a body. True freedom is the ability to act perfectly according to reason. Sin is slavery. Virtue is liberty. This inverts how we think about freedom today. We define freedom as the absence of constraint. Leo says that is not freedom. That is Lucifer's motto: I will not serve. In Rerum Novarum, written in 1891, Leo attacks unregulated capitalism. A very few rich and exceedingly rich men have laid a yoke almost of slavery on the unnumbered masses of non-owning workers. Defrauding a worker of his just wage is a great crime that calls down avenging wrath from heaven. He is equally savage against socialism. He calls it highly unjust, a system that would dry up the fountains of wealth and produce uniform wretchedness for one and all. His solution is neither left nor right. Widespread private property, strong families, workers' guilds under the church, and wages high enough that a man can support his family and buy land. He writes, "The wealth of nations originates from no other source than from the labor of workers." Almost word for word Marx, except Leo uses it to defend private property, not abolish it. In Humanum Genus, Leo claims the Freemasons deliberately promote vice as a control strategy, saturate the masses with pleasure so they become docile. Pope St. Pius X was a warrior, and his enemy was not outside the church, it was inside. His 1907 encyclical Pascendi identifies a movement within the Catholic Church, priests, theologians, seminary professors, systematically hollowing out the faith from within. He calls modernism the synthesis of all heresies. The modernists taught that dogma evolves. that the Christ of faith is different from the Christ of history, that the resurrection is not a historical event, that the Church was not founded by Jesus but emerged from the collective consciousness of early Christians, that all religions are expressions of the same inner religious sense. These are now mainstream positions in most university theology departments. Pius X mandated the oath against modernism, required of every Catholic cleric and seminary professor for over 50 years. He ordered diocesan councils of vigilance to monitor for modernist ideas. Modernist professors were to be removed without compunction. That oath was quietly abolished in 1967, 2 years after Vatican II ended. He also condemned the Syllabus, a French youth movement that drifted from democracy must be Catholic to working with Protestants and atheists for social justice, to what Pius X described as a one-world church which shall have neither dogmas nor hierarchy. Every Catholic movement that puts social action above doctrine, he warned, ends up abandoning the faith entirely. Pope Pius XI wrote 3 critical documents. Quas Primas establishes the feast of Christ the King. Pius XI says, Christ holds literal, legislative, judicial, and executive authority over every nation on earth. Not metaphorically, not spiritually. States that refuse to acknowledge this are building on sand. He wrote this in 1925, with Mussolini consolidating power and secularism sweeping Europe, telling every government on earth, you answer to Christ, whether you admit it or not. In Mortalium Animos, he flatly forbids Catholics from participating in interreligious gatherings. If the Catholic Church is the one true church, then treating other religions as equals is not charity. It is betrayal. He quotes the Apostle John, "If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, do not receive him into your house." In Divini Redemptoris, on atheistic communism. Communism is intrinsically wrong, and no one who would save Christian civilization may collaborate with it in any undertaking whatsoever. No exceptions. What makes this document remarkable is the anti-capitalism. Pius XI turns on Catholic employers. He names industrialists who suppressed his own Encyclicals in their parish churches. Is it not deplorable that the right of private property defended by the Church should so often have been used as a weapon to defraud the working man? Communism spread because the rich ignored Catholic social teaching. The enemy was not just Marx, it was greedy Catholics. The final document is Pope Pius XII's Humani Generis, issued in 1950. He permits research into bodily evolution, but draws a hard line against polygenism, the idea that humanity descended from multiple first parents rather than Adam and Eve. He insists that truth cannot change, that Thomistic philosophy is not outmoded, and that what popes say in encyclicals demands consent, even when not speaking infallibly. Almost everything these 6 popes condemned between 1832 and 1950, religious liberty, separation of church and state, freedom of conscience, ecumenism, the historical critical method of reading scripture, was either adopted, accommodated, or reframed by the Catholic Church itself at the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s. That leaves 2 possible conclusions. Either these popes were wrong, 6 successive vicars of Christ over 160 years consistently taught error on matters of faith and morals, which raises serious questions about papal authority. Or Vatican II represents exactly what Pius X warned about, the modernist victory he spent his pontificate trying to prevent. These documents force a question that modern civilization has been avoiding for 200 years. What if freedom, untethered from truth, really does destroy itself? Pick up the book, read it yourself.